Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I got to tell you something, people. My guest today, I got an email a few weeks ago from his PR guy and said, you want to go see my client open for 2 cellos at Wells Fargo in Philly? And of course, well, one, it's a free concert. I'm not turning anything free down. But I had never been to Wells Fargo for a concert because when they built it, I had already moved to the West Coast. And secondly, I was excited because Joanne was going with me. And Joanne never goes to see concerts. She just doesn't like them. So we went, and my guest was great. And something weird happened, which I got to talk to him during his set, and he covered up perfectly. But he's about to go over to Europe, and he's a great singer-songwriter. His name is Matt Simons. How you doing, Matt?
Hey, I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So I got to ask you, okay, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You're in the middle of your set, and all of a sudden I hear all this cheering. Now we're at center stage. We're like 9 rows back. And I hear this cheering, and I'm thinking, did Bradley Cooper walk in? Did an eagle walk in? Because it was just random. It wasn't at the end of your song. It was like in the middle of your song, which, as I remember, wasn't really a song about love. And what did you see? Because this guy got engaged, but did you know anything about it, or what went on in your mind?
Oh, it was a total surprise. Yeah, we were playing a song called "Open Up," and you started hearing people cheering. I was like, all right. Maybe we're really killing it because we never get mid-song cheers on this. But I think I look like 4 rows deep in the front. There's a guy on one knee and he's proposing. Like, all right, look at that. It just maybe that's. I don't know if it was like they didn't want to interrupt the 2 cellos show to do it, so we wanted to get it out of the way during the opener. I didn't know if they specifically wanted to do it during my set, but it was cool. It was, that's always fun. It was a nice little moment, and we could acknowledge it at the end of the song. And
it was
always fun.
It was just random to me because you don't know what's going on, and it's just so, like you said, it's you're in the middle of a song, and I think when I got engaged to my wife, I wasn't at a concert, 1, and 2, I would wait till probably in between bands just because she's listening to the music. Or
she could shoot me if you're planning on shoot me a message, and I could make a moment out of it. I could be like, hey, I think there's something about to go down in row 4. We could have made a moment. But hey, you know what? She said yes, so I guess it all worked out.
So you're a guy who you've been on the road a lot, and I got to ask you, what are some other weird things that have happened to you while on stage? Because people always say, I talked to some 80s musicians who back in England, the crowds were just brutal. Have you had any nightmares happen to you on stage, or just shit that just went wrong and you really have to think on your feet?
I mean, technical stuff goes wrong a lot. It's probably the most common, where just a mic cuts out, or at Hollywood Bowl, the belt pack that connects my in-ears so I can hear what's going on stage ran out of batteries. So I had no reference for what I was playing. I've got stuff in my ears. Basically it goes from having monitors in your ears to having tissue paper stuffed in your ears, basically. So we had to have someone come on stage and take the battery pack and fix it for me. But as our audience go, I mean, people you have medical emergencies that happen, people pass out, especially in if it's a festival, people have been drinking all day and it's hot. You have to maybe stop for that. But it's not people don't usually, I'm not in a metal band, so people aren't really throwing stuff at the singer-songwriter on stage unless they really hate the music, which luckily hasn't happened yet. But shit does happen, but you just kind of roll with the punches.
Now, I wanted to ask you about the Hollywood Bowl because I had seen concerts there, and it's such a. And I saw your Instagram, the picture. Your name was on the front of the Hollywood Bowl and that sign. And as a musician, I must just think that must be such a surreal moment because everyone remembers the Beatles at Hollywood Bowl. I saw Motley Crue and Alice Cooper, and the drum solo came out. And people, if you've never been to the Hollywood Bowl, I was sitting in the cheap seats. The benches are uncomfortable as all hell. But but the boxes are beautiful. It's such a legendary place. What was it like? I mean, when you found out, because you're on this tour with 2 cellos, so you're going to play cool places. But what was going through your mind when you first found out you're going to play there, and then when it actually became the day you're going to play there?
I mean, this whole tour, getting to roll into Philly and play Wells Fargo, to roll into Brooklyn where I used to live and be playing Barclays Center, and L.A. where I live and playing Hollywood Bowl. Like, I wouldn't say I'd given up on playing those places, but since so much of my audience is in Europe, I really never expected it to happen in the States, because I've played shows that are this big over in Netherlands and in Germany and stuff like that, but like to have it happen in America was really special. And Hollywood Bowl specifically, my mom's mom, my grandmother, used to sing at the Hollywood Bowl. She was in choirs, and my mom has memories of like being a child and running up and down the stairs with a friend. So my parents did end up coming down from the Bay Area and got to sit and watch the show at the Hollywood Bowl. So I think for my mom, that was pretty special, having been there as a child and then seeing her son play there.
Now, tell me how you got started in music. You said your grandmother sang. Were your parents musical, or how did it all start?
So my dad has a love for music, and my mom has a lot of music in her blood. I mean, her parents were opera singers, which sometimes would influence maybe would influence your child to be a musician, but I think it made her run 100 miles in the opposite direction from music. I think it wasn't necessarily. Sometimes it just skips a generation, But I started playing piano when I was really young, and still you start playing classical music and stuff like that. I didn't love classical music, so I switched to jazz when I was about 12, playing saxophone, and that kind of carried me through all through college, where I got a jazz performance degree at Sony Purchase up in White Plains in New York. And I always did pop music on the side. And then when I was about 21, I decided I was going to finally start recording the songs that I had been writing. In the jazz world, some would say that pop is seen as a lesser form of music, so I kind of kept it a secret. When I would like write my pop songs in the practice room when late at night when no one else was there, so no one could hear me like playing the piano and singing, because I'm supposed to be playing saxophone and playing jazz.
Now, where were you finding the writing from? Because I always think when you have people who are write when they're younger, it's different than when you write when you're older. I know now you're married, I believe, and you have children, so I'm sure when you write is differently. But when you're a kid, I mean, I always think, and it amazes me because, some of these bands who became, they become so young, they hit it, and I'm like, what are they writing about? Like, what were you writing about when you were young? Would you wake up and go, oh, Susie just broke my heart? Or, I mean, where would it come from?
It's funny. I feel like it's a little bit youth being wasted on the young, where like I have the experiences of feelings are so much more intense, and the experiences are so fresh of brand new heartbreak, but I didn't necessarily have the writing skills to be able to get those messages across. And now that I've written so many songs, I'm having to access those earlier feelings that I had where I didn't really have the skill to make the really great song. I feel like if you've got a very young person that's incredibly technically savvy, and they also are having fresh heartbreak, youthful experiences, that's like the magic combo for great writing.
Now, what's your writing process these days? I mean, like when you sit there, does it just come to you and you write, or do you actually make yourself sit down or write? Because you seem to have a lot, as you said, you write a lot of songs. Do you have a certain process, or you just wing it?
My favorite process is to come up with the idea for the song first. I feel like if you can it doesn't even have to be a melody. It doesn't even have to be lyric idea necessarily. It's just like, today I want to write about X. I want to write about, this thing. I want to write about, I had a song called Not Falling Apart that I played during the set. And I came into that session and be like, I want to write a song where every line is a lie. Where, it's like sort of it's not sarcastic. You're just like, you're lying to yourself. And that was the idea for that day. So then it becomes a lot easier to just sort of sit down as opposed to starting completely cold.
So back to when you started out. So you get there, you go to school for music, and then you start recording. Now, how do you get that first album out? Was it an easy process for you? Or because now it seems like you can record easier, but there's not a lot of people are buying albums. I mean, it's something I come from a generation where I was like all about, feeling that album, looking at it, the songs. Now, if you want to hear a song, you can just go, oh, I could buy it for 99 cents, or But how did you get to that record deal?
So my last year of school, I decided it would be a good idea to use the free studio that we have on campus, because once I graduate, studios are going to cost thousands of dollars a day, which I didn't have. So I teamed up with a buddy of mine that was in the studio production department, and he kind of produced a small EP, which I've since scrubbed from the internet. It didn't age as well as I would have liked necessarily, but it kind of got my foot in the door. And then once that was made, I self-released just on iTunes, which I think was really one of the only services at that point. There weren't streaming services yet. It was 2009, so Spotify didn't exist. And I then started using Facebook ads, which were kind of brand new at the time. No one was really using them. It was long before the time that, they were being used to destroy democracy. I would just put out ads I would spend about $1 a day, and it would say, you like Jason Mraz? Then check out this guy who's not Jason Mraz. You like John Mayer? Come listen to this album. And it ended up being a really cheap way to gain audience on the internet, because no one was doing it at the time. They were not, ads are really cheap gaining it. Now it's so expensive, and it's all algorithm and everyone's, all the massive companies are involved in it. So you can't really it'd be difficult to break through that way. But at the time, I got probably about 10,000 Facebook fans, and relatively quickly and relatively cheaply.
So how do you translate that into business? Because everyone says the numbers, where do you go with that? Because if you come in and you have 10,000 fans, that's a hell of a lot. I mean, that's a good following. I know now you have over 300,000 YouTube followers, but I mean, at that time, as you said, it's new. The advertisements are new, which the algorithms bother me. I mean, I get stuff from LA still, and I see a great Mexican brush. I'm like, oh, this is great. I go, the hell, it's in North Hollywood. It's I'm back here, and they just have that pattern. But what did you do once you had the 10,000? Was that an asset to you?
It's funny. It was an asset, but only because there was one woman who clicked on an ad. She's from the Netherlands. And she was a writer on the biggest primetime Dutch soap opera. And when I released my first full-length album, she recommended that one of my songs be used in the big pivotal emotional moment of the show. And the next day after that, the song went viral, and I went from not really having a career to having one in that one day.
It's amazing because I remember, back when Family Ties, Billy Veers at this moment became huge, and all of a sudden he just blew up. So you probably just blew up in the Netherlands because of big show. So now, when you blow up in the Netherlands, did they call you and say, we want you to come over and tour? I mean, it's just amazing because how someone becomes big in the Netherlands. You think maybe Canada or England, but the Netherlands. I want to hear the process of after that song becomes viral. Are people calling you, or what happens?
Yeah, I woke up to a message in my inbox from a guy at Sony Music, the label, but specifically for the Netherlands, and he wanted to, he saw the song was, had just blown up on iTunes and was getting a lot of buzz. Radio stations were starting to play the song, and they wanted to sign me from there on out. So and then I had a booking agent. I'd toured America and even played in a little bit in the UK, and actually I'd been to Amsterdam before to play as well. But, these shows were maximum 100 people. Usually about a dozen people would show up. Sometimes 0 people would show up. So a couple months after the song is called With You, kind of took off in the Netherlands. I had a 11-show club tour through 9 cities. And every single show, about 300 to 500 person, and they all sold out, almost instantly. So I had never had that before.
So you're gaining momentum over there. So now people know you. So is your concentration to sit there and concentrate over there because you're making your bread and butter there, you're making your shoes there, or in the back of your mind you say, I really want to still crack America? I mean, it must be hard for a young artist to figure out, do you stay with over there, because you are away from home, and I mean, I'm sure it's great being on the road over there, but what was your gut feeling? What did you really want to do?
I think it would have been a grave mistake to not invest my time into developing that market where the iron was hot. I think taking that and trying to run with it in America just wouldn't have worked then. And I'm glad I didn't do that, because I ended up spending a ton of time over in the Netherlands. I did lots of touring. I did some opening shows. And, literally, and it was confined within the borders of the Netherlands. It's a country about the population and size of Connecticut. So you could think like, well, I'm big in Stamford and Bridgeport and Hartford.
New Canaan. I'm in New Canaan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's like Connecticut size. And then you go right next door to, New Hampshire. And, like, no one would, like, Germany. Like, at that point, no, I didn't have any audience in Germany. And it was Belgium even, like, very little audience in Belgium. So it was all focused on this one country because they speak their own language there. Not a lot of crossover, and they have a really self-sustaining music industry. I've gotten to meet a lot of very famous Dutch artists. I've gotten to know a lot of people in the music industry just in that small country. And also, I feel like if I were to move anywhere else in the world, it would be there. It feels like a second home when I go there. Even now that I go kind of all around the rest of Europe, Netherlands still feels like my strongest connection.
So how do you build from the Netherlands? How do you build? Because I know you said you have a big European following. How does that build? I mean, is it something that, as you said, the Netherlands is small? It's not, it's not like, bands play Germany, people know Germany. I mean, how did you build your following in Europe? What did you do to make you, popular over there?
Yeah, it's funny. I released this song called Catch and Release in 2014, and I was still focused mainly on the Netherlands, and it was a minor radio hit in Holland. I think it charted at number 100 on the top 100 over there. Like it didn't go crazy, but it's still like it got a little bit of attention in the Netherlands, and this was right at the onset of the tropical house movement. Like Kygo was just coming up, and there was that Apilini Pizza remix that Mike Posner with Sieb. And I feel like there were a few people on SoundCloud that were making these like amateur tropical house remixes of Catch and Release. And I would hear them, and the ones that they were making weren't really good enough to be released, but I kind of had the idea, okay, if someone were to remix this really, really professionally and really well, I think it could be, it could work. I think, maybe it could be more radio friendly because the original is pretty quiet and pretty slow. So my manager, who is Dutch, and a lot of the DJs that are famous are Dutch, he got in touch with Armin van Buren's company called Armada, just looking for an up and coming DJ that wanted to do we could commission a remix for like, a few $100. And we went through a few different iterations, and we came across one by Deep End, who was now it's just one guy, but it used to be a DJ duo. And the remix that they came up with, I thought was just brilliant. I loved it. We released it, and it started to get all of this hype, this independent hype. And then there's a website called Hype Machine where it's a kind of a chart of what's going viral on the internet, and the song kept going to number 1 on that chart. And that's when radio in Europe started to pick it up. My label started to service it to radio, and it ended up going number 1 in like 9 or 10 countries over there. After, it took about 6 months for that to happen. But yeah, the song just kind of grew legs and ran.
What is it like when you look and you hear it's number 1? That must be a great feeling. I mean, it's like, it must be something where you sit there and go, holy crap, I'm number 1. And I know you can be humble and you can be modest, but it must be a great feeling.
Yeah, it was cool. We knocked off Adele. So Adele had just released Hello, which was like a number one for 11 or 12 weeks. And when the song that knocked her off of number one in both France and in Germany was my song. So yeah, it's fun when my name being mentioned even in the same sentence as artists. Like, who else was on the chart then? Bieber was on the chart then. Adele was on the chart. So that it feels pretty cool.
Now, were you building up a big following as you toured? I mean, were you getting more people to shows, and were you getting more bookings over in Europe because it was a number one?
Yeah, I was able to, do my first tour bus tour all around Europe, and I did 2 of those in 2016, and we hit a bunch of cities. And gosh, where'd we go? It was Netherlands, Belgium, France. We went to Italy. We went to Switzerland. I think we did Vienna, Austria. I went to, of course, a lot of shows in Germany. So that around that time, and since then, my last 2019, the Europe tour, we added, some of the Baltics, a couple of the Nordic countries, did Portugal, like just a kind of as much of continental Europe as I could do.
So you're hot, things are building up. You're in a tour bus, and then the pandemic happens.
Yeah.
So as an artist, you work hard to get to a certain point. You bust your ass. You're overseas, and I mean, what was your? Did you think it was going to last maybe for like 2 months? I mean, I talked to different artists who sit there and go, "Oh yeah, we did our last show. And we had to fly from England over to the U.S. and then we thought, oh, we'll be back on the road in 3 months." And then I'm talking, and it's like a year later, like, oh Christ, we're not. What was going through your head because you sat there, you were on this streak, and then all of a sudden it's like, stop.
It's funny. I've been really, really busy since probably between 2014 and 2019. So New Year's, you talk about kind of what you're with friends and what your wish is for the new year, what your hope is. And mine was to travel less. So I think it was like a monkey's paw where you wish for something and then the whole world shut. Like, I did travel a lot less, so my wish was granted, but at what cost?
Now, do you miss it? I mean, during that time, I always think, and once again, I talk to people who say it was great. I got to spend time with my family, spend time with my friends, because musicians are always on the grind, studio, road, writing. And then they said it was great for like the first 2 months, but I'm someone who used to do stand-up comedy. I was on the road for 6 years back in the late 80s. And I go back on stage every once in a while, and when I do, I'm like, this is great. And then the next day, I'm like, yeah, I'm like driving to another gig. But your body gets used to it. For you, because it was so long, did you start like getting, I say like stage withdrawal at all? Because you're used to the admiration and the cheering.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss it, and I just, even that connection with just with even a small audience, 200 or 300 people, having people, because I had released a lot of music and I hadn't been able to play it for anyone. I probably had 5 or 6 different songs that I had released from about 2020 into this year. And normally I get to release a song and then I get to go play it at a concert and see who's, okay, wow, like look at all these people have already learned the words and they're singing. So I miss getting that feedback about new music for sure. And yeah, it's funny you talk about sort of your body not being ready for the road. And I do feel like the 2 years off, I've aged a lot that, on this tour where I'm sleeping on a tour bus. We drove all the way across the country and I get home immediately and I throw on my back, like carrying my 9-month-old son. It's like I'm pushing him in the stroller up. We live on this little hill and pushing him up the hill. And I just like tweaked my back. Like I was kind of like laying down for a few days. And I think it might've had something to do with all that bus sleeping that I was doing.
Now, how'd you end up on the Today Show? I know that was a while back, but I got a clip of that. Someone sent me, your PR guy sent me a clip of that. How did that happen? And that must have been, that's big time. You got Al Roker. You got Al Roker introducing you.
It was pretty cool. There was a moment when Catch and Release, that remix I was talking about, I'd already done big numbers over in Europe. There was a U.S. label called Republic Records that picked it up, and they're kind of the big dogs for U.S. radio. So they could get big promo opportunities like the Today Show. So there was a point I was traveling around America doing radio interviews, which I normally only did in Europe, and the song did not blow up the way that it did in Europe, but it got there are a bunch of stations that played it. We had K-Fog in the Bay Area, which is what I grew up listening to, and they were playing the song. Kink Radio up in Portland, a lot of these like kind of they call AAA stations, which are sometimes public radio, sometimes it's like adult album alternative. It's a little bit more of the indie stuff. Like I'm trying to think of who are like the kings of the Avett Brothers are kind of like the kings of AAA radio, and that's where that song lived in America. So there's some people know it over here, but that record deal came with things like the Today Show, and that's how it got booked.
Now, how did you end up on the Two Cellos tour? Because I'll be honest, I had never heard of the Two Cellos, and I try to follow music, and my wife had seen a billboard, and I looked them up. And when you think about it, your guys' music is, you're a singer-songwriter. They're like, fire and shit like that. How did that tour happen? Was it because you had the same management, or what happened with that tour? And you must have been very excited.
I mean, I was thrilled. I remember first hearing about it, and my manager was kind of like, he was like, don't get your hopes up. There's opportunities out there. You're being presented as an option for this tour, and I like to manage my expectations. So I was like, all right, probably not going to happen. Stuff like this comes across my email a lot, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. But we have the same booking agents both in Europe and in America. So it's CAA in America, and it's an agency called One Phoenix over in the UK, and he books them for Europe. And they both recommended me to do the tour because even though the music is different, I feel like there's audience crossover a little. Like it works. I feel like my shows in Europe, when you go to a show of mine, the audience it's kind of a mix of all different ages and kind of all different kinds of people. And I think Two Cellos has the same kind of audience. Like you look out into the crowd and there's young people, there's older couples, there's kind of a little bit of everything. And I think my booking agent saw my audience was a little bit similar to that, so he thought it could work. And I feel like it's worked really, really well. Like I don't know, it's the audience has been really amazing on the tour. Normally you go to a show and everyone's talking through the opener, and I don't feel like that happened.
Well, in Philly,
I feel like people were listening. In
Philly, the audience was very different. It was like I was sitting there, and there was like a family behind me, and then I'm older. Me and my wife are older, but like an older couple, and then like these dudes with like big beards that look like bikers. And I'm gonna be honest, during your set, nobody talked because I'm one of those people, because I know a lot of musicians, and it pisses me off. Like if I was at a concert one time and these people wouldn't shut up, and my buddy was like, "Would you shut up?" Because it's so disrespectful because you're an artist. But you had them from the beginning. Now, but you played a little to the right of the stage. Was there a reason for that? I mean, did they sit there and say, because I know their drum set didn't come out till the middle of the set, but you played to the right. Was that every city you did that, or what?
Yeah, it's really just a setup thing. They only have so much time to set up the stage in between the set. So I think, they've got the positioning exactly right on that stage. They've got, the cellos all set up right in the center. And I just think they don't really want to be moving everything around in between the sets. And it's such a big stage that there is plenty of space for us to be off to the side. I remember at the beginning thinking like, oh no, how's this going to go? But I kind of feel like it's fine. Like, I don't know how it was as an audience member, but hopefully it wasn't too distracting. Yeah.
Now, do you play the same set every night, or are you mixing it up because you have a certain amount of time? What has your course of action been, and do they care if you mix it up?
I could mix it. I'm going to have to mix it up a little bit more in Europe. I played the same set every night. It just felt, especially because we're just getting back on the road, and also this audience doesn't know my music yet, so it's not like my shows. If I throw in a B-side or something from one of the earlier records, that could be exciting for the audience. the audiences on this tour, I wouldn't even know it. So I thought it was better. Just let's play the same thing every night. Let's get it really, really tight. And then we go over to Europe. You know, when we play in Amsterdam, I'm gonna play that song with you. That's only a hit in the Netherlands, and I don't play that song on the rest of the tour because no one else, and the other countries don't know it. But that's my biggest song in the Netherlands, so I got to play that one. So we'll switch it up a little bit overseas.
Now tell me about your new single. You have a great website, people. The website's mattsimonsmusic.com, and you have it says it's ICYMI. What does that mean? I mean, I know there's an acronym for acronyms everywhere. Tell me about the new single.
Yeah, the new single is called "In Case You Missed It," and that's a little ICYMI is like the internet way of writing it. And I wrote that song. Actually, that's one of the few I wrote during the pandemic. And I wrote it with my good buddy, who actually was the guitar player in my band, who you saw. We did the Boxer together, and Chris Ayer, and I wrote that song. And we, just kind of writing about that in the beginning of a relationship. This again is referencing, I'm married now, so we're trying to dig in. He's married as well, so we're trying to dig into our pasts and that, that time in a relationship at the beginning where you're kind of trying to find the balance of how eager you need to be when responding. It needs to be somewhere between over texting and ghosting. Like there's a spectrum in there, and you kind of got to find the balance. So it's kind of about that. You're telling the other person, like, hey, if you want to make this if you really want to do this thing, then I suggest you should maybe write me back when you get messages and don't leave me hanging here.
Now you said you're a father. You have a 9-month-old. How has that changed your writing? Has it changed your writing? Because now you're a completely. I've never had kids, but I know my friends who have kids. They're completely different, and it's something that. And you're on the road and you miss your kids. If they're not, are you starting to incorporate that in your writing yet, or are you going to wait till he gets a little older, or what's your thought process on that?
I do one song on the new album. That's coming out when the album releases. It's called "Always Have My Love," and I wrote it right before he was born. Just saying that, through whatever happens, I'll always be there for him, and I haven't even met him yet. So, we'll see. My writing, I feel like, is emotional enough. I don't necessarily need all that extra emotion in there, but I definitely feel, for the first few months at least, you're such a sleep deprived, but also just emotional wreck. And but I haven't written that much since he was born, so I guess it remains to be seen how it's going to change my writing. Now,
how did you choose to play the Boxer? Are you a big Simon and Garfunkel fan, or what? What was that?
I mean, yeah, I think Paul Simon, one of the greatest, if not the greatest songwriter, of all time. I love his stuff. And Chris and I, because a lot of those early tours we did together, so it's been pretty fun. The last time we played that song in Philly was probably we did a tour back in 2018, and we did it. It was a U.S. tour, and a lot of the shows were really, really great. But we rolled into Philly, and only 13 people showed up. And this is after I had done. I've been doing all these big shows in Europe. Like, man, this maybe is a waste of time. But those 13 was great. Those 13 people were a great audience, and we played the Boxer that night. And we'd been playing the Boxer for 10 years, and we released it as a single together over kind of the holidays, sort of a not Christmas song, because it does talk about the winter in New York. And I just felt really fun, that fact that we've been playing that song so many times over the years. Now we're playing these big arenas. Why not do it together?
Now, who would you say have been your musical influences? I mean, were you a young? I mean, you're younger. Were you like an old heart? Like, oh, I love Dylan, or I love this song. Or I mean, who were because you're 30. What, you're 35?
I'm 35 now. Yeah.
So I always think like, because we all come from different generations. We have different, like my generation, everyone's Springsteen, But who were your influences growing up? Like when you were smaller, and have they changed as you've gotten older?
Yeah, I mean, McCartney always been my favorite Beatle. I played a lot of like growing up. I just played through the entire Beatles. It was Beatles fake book, and I would just go from front to back and play through that. I such a great foundation for songwriting if anyone's trying to learn. I love Stevie. I mean, I got way into like all the Otis Redding, Marvin Gaye, Al Green when I was playing around in New York. A lot of that old soul. When I was doing cover gigs at bars. I also great jazz musicians, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis. Those guys are big influence on me. I love bluegrass music too. There's a band called Nickel Creek that I've always really, really loved and listened to their records kind of religiously in my younger years. Jazz singers, Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and Harry Connick Jr. That a lot of influence on me as well. So kind of comes from everywhere.
Now, are you excited about the European tour? Because you're out for a while, and it's not, there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of bus driving there, and there's a lot of beautiful country, but are you excited? I mean, because I always think, it must be weird because, your wife's on the West Coast, and you're on Europe, so it's like a 12-hour time difference.
9-hour time difference.
What is that like? What is it like for you on the road? Because I always sit there, it's a strong woman that can marry a musician because they got to hold the fort down. But they also know that they married you because what you do and your creativity, so it's part of the game. But what are you? Is it a little odd because now you're back for a little bit? Now you're going back out again, which is what you love. But then you're like, oh shit, I'm going to be going for a while, 9 hours. I mean, where does that put you mentally, even when you're performing?
I think performing, I can kind of separate it, but it's tough all those hours when I would like to be here. I would like to be helping, and I would just like to be spending time with my boy. I mean, you don't get these weeks back. He changes so much every single week that every week that I'm gone, I miss a lot, which is really, really hard. Which is also why I like that it's only 3 weeks at a time, and then I'm back for 3 weeks, and then I'm on the road for 3 weeks. It's not the big 8 to 10 week tours that I did when my wife and I were dating. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like 3 weeks is kind of a maximum. Any more than that, it's gonna start to be really tough. But I also stay when I'm on the road. I'm up late, so 9 hours. If it were 9 hours the other way, it might be really difficult because I don't wake up until later, and then I'm going to bed late. So we can still keep in touch, and luckily babies are really good at FaceTime, significantly better than dogs. Dogs do not know how to FaceTime, but babies get it. They see the face, they recognize the face, they understand that it's moving and interacting with them. Luckily he gets it.
Now, I'm going to ask you, how did you build such a huge YouTube following? Like, you have some videos that have I think one is 30 million views. I mean, it's sick numbers. I mean, does that just come from a grassroots campaign or people talking? I mean, you can have a hit and it can be a few hundred. I mean, you have something, I saw one had 30 million views. I mean, that's sick. That's
yeah, I feel like, I think there's one on Catch Release that has 100 million even, and it's just like a lyric video. That's the one that people really gravitated towards for that song. But I guess I've had 2 songs that have done pretty well on European radio. It was because for a long time I was being called a one-hit wonder for a couple of years, which it's nice to have a hit, but it was a little hurtful. So I had a song called "We Can Do Better," which I also did on the tour, and that one was top 10 on European radio. And now people can call me a 2-hit wonder if they want to, but that's not as hurtful. So doesn't have the same ring. Doesn't have the same ring to it.
Well, the thing I always say though, it's you had one hit. I mean, but you haven't. But I always think people think that's such a bad thing. It's like, no, they had one hit. Like, I know actors who have gotten pilots, and they go, oh, my pilot didn't get picked up. I said, yeah, but you got a pilot. I said, you know how many people are trying to get pilots? I mean, it's success. I mean, if you have one hit, that means millions of people, you've had the life better than most people. You got the tour playing your music and doing what you do. Now, the album, you said the new album, when's the release for that? And is it all done now?
Yeah, the new album comes out, is it next week? May 6th or something? What's next week?
May 6th would be Friday.
Yeah, I think it comes out on Friday next Friday, a week. Yeah, May 6th. So it's coming.
Now, what are your anticipation? Like, do you sit there in your mind and say, I want to sell this much? Or if you don't hit something, do you get upset? Or are you just happy because you have a new album and if people like it? I mean, what's the anticipation of a singer-songwriter when they bring something new out?
You know, probably the last time I released an album, there were a ton of new unreleased songs, like normal with an album. But this release, I've done what you call a waterfall release, where you kind of release singles one at a time and you build as it goes. So right now there is an album out there with 4 songs on it that are all released on Spotify, like the In Case You Missed It single or EPS, and those are all going to be on the new record because, and this is the least creative thing you can say, but the algorithm favors singles. You know, it used to be that an album was the beginning of a release cycle, where you put out the album and it's got a single on it, and then you release more songs off of that album as singles. And there are a very, very select few artists that can still do that. Now, if you're an artist and you've got an album out, that's the end of a release cycle. No songs are going to be special from that album anymore. So it makes sense to release everything as a single. It shows up in people's like release radar playlists if it's a single, and you're just going to get more streams on your song and more attention to that song than if it's just sitting on an album that nobody really buys anymore.
And one final question. What's your long plan? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I mean, seriously, what do you want? I mean, do you want to become a megastar, or do you like where you are? Because some people don't want to become that big superstar because their whole life changes. They never get their life back. I mean, what do you want? What does Matt Simons want?
I truly believe there's a sweet spot in notoriety, and that's when people know your music and they know your name, but they don't know your face. So you don't want to overshoot that and get too famous. But I'm also in the place now where in Europe, I think a lot of people know my music, but they don't know my name. So if we could get to the point right there, and then I could just stop. don't tell my label this. They would like it to go all the way. But I think the sweet spot is right there.
And now, once this album comes out, have you already started working on your next one? Are you going to take some time and just go on tour? Or you got to sit there, you're probably churning the creative process when you're on the road. But when's the next album? Do you have any idea, or are you just like, I'm not even going to think about it?
I'm going to start writing, but I'm going to take a break. These last 2 records I kind of did back to back, like one in 2019 and now one in 2022. That may not feel like back to back, but I was done with the other record and I already had 5 or 6 songs for the new record. So I'm going to maybe take some time with this one and really, really sit and conceptually and artistically feel like, I don't know, try and find what am I trying to do? What am I looking for? I think that's an important step to take at this point.
Well, that's awesome. I want to thank you for taking the time. I really enjoyed the show, and and it's funny. My wife we both started following you on Instagram, and you post some good stuff there. And I think Instagram's great because it gives a different side of an artist. It doesn't. You can just put a picture up and put a caption, and people find it because you get on Twitter, and you can post something, and Twitter is, oh, fuck you, you suck. You're like, wait a second, I just posted a picture of me on stage. And I mean, you know how it is. I mean, especially being in the public eye. But do you like posting on Instagram? I mean, every show do you try to do it, or do you try to keep a pattern? Because your fans seem to like it.
Yeah, Instagram's the one that even if I wasn't an artist, I would probably still have an Instagram. The rest of them, I don't know that I would with other platforms. It's tough because as a musician, it feels like social media is a job that nobody signed up for. It's so different from creating music. It's such a different skill set being good at the internet versus being good at making music. There are some people who do a great job at both, and it works really naturally. But I think a lot of musicians struggle with, okay, I've made a great product, this music I really love and enjoy, and the only way that I'm going to get anyone to hear it is if I go viral on TikTok.
Right.
You know, that just seems like, what's the old Mitch Hedberg joke of being a comedian and then asking you to act? It's like being a chef and then like, oh, can you farm?
Right.
It's just like totally, I don't like, it's just a different skill set. It's related kind of to being an artist, but it can be pretty soul crushing and difficult. And I think a lot of artists are going through that right now.
And now, what is your Instagram?
Matt Simon's Music.
Okay, so people, Matt Simon's Music, go check him out. Great pictures from the tour. Go to his website, mattsimonsmusic.com. Go purchase his new single, get his new album, and check him out. And go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 900 episodes. Email me, Cooper at coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at CooperTalk. Instagram, I'm at CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.